I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Jackie Morey. I've been here forever. Cheryl and I have both been here forever.
Early days.
Oh, we recognized you.
So we're going to talk about my most recent project, our most recent project, called, as a good project should have an acronym, we've got the Transitional Online Post-Deployment Soldier Support in Virtual Worlds, or TOPSS VW project, or as we like to call it, Coming Home, because that's a mouthful. So our agenda today is I'm going to introduce the project. Eric Chance is going to talk about some of the health activities in the virtual world we're doing. Dinesh Purohit and Kip Haynes will talk about some of the virtual agent avatars we've made. Dinesh and I are going to talk a little bit about community, and you'll hear why. And then I'll conclude and talk very briefly about future work. Then you get to ask some questions. So we're asking you to hold questions till the end if you don't mind. Write them down, and we'll answer as many as we can. And then we have a very special VR theater demonstration. Kip Haynes has been able to get Second Life running in the 3-projector VR theater. So that's going to be fun. So we've saved about 15 minutes at the end for that. So I'm going to start talking about virtual worlds, which is what we're using for this project. Now, virtual worlds, as compared to virtual environments, are more social. They're very rich and networked, persistent 3D environments that people experience by means of taking on an avatar and going through the space as an avatar. These avatars can have activities and affect things in the virtual world. Virtual environments, by contrast, are typically standalone applications that are meant for a specific purpose, and they're typically not very networked and they're not social. We're primarily interested in the social nature that virtual worlds afford. Many people can inhabit them and communicate in them, so they're very important in that regard, and they're becoming more and more popular. And in fact, things like Avatar the movie have spawned a lot of people deciding to try avatars in the virtual world. This was the day the movie came out in Second Life. So virtual worlds are, as I said, very popular. 1 in 8 people now use virtual worlds. And this is a fairly complicated chart, but I wanted to show you that just since 2005, these rings represent years, okay? The red dots are existing virtual worlds. The size is relative to the number of participants. Blue are ones in development. The orange dot is when they were launched, so you can see most of them have been launched in the last couple of years. But this is what's amazing. This first quadrant is ages 5 to 10. And look at the virtual worlds that are there. Everything from Club Pony Pals to Hello Kitty, there's the Barbie girls, there's a whole bunch of them that are in this very youngest demographic. And then from age 10 to 15, we see even more. So this has things like Disney's Club Penguin, Neopets, Lego Universe. There's a whole slew of them. This one down here, Stardoll, just passed the 55 million user mark. And there are even virtual worlds. I belong to one called Jasmine Club, which is for Muslim girls, Muslim tween girls. So you can go shopping for your scarves and all kinds of interesting things. So we see less as we get to our age group, but this group is coming up, and they're going to want even more sophisticated virtual worlds for work, play, learning, and the like. So there are still issues with virtual worlds. They're not perfect. Right now you have to have a pretty good graphics card and an internet connection. That probably won't change. There's often a steep learning curve to virtual worlds. Sometimes you're very confused when you get in there. What do I do? Who do I talk to? How do I find people? How do I find people that like the things that I like? You can also encounter what they call reefers, who are just out to make mayhem in the virtual world, and even overly enthusiastic managers who say, oh, you can't do that here. But in spite of that, they're being used for a lot of applications. So entertainment, you can go to musical performances, art shows, lectures in the virtual world. Many famous people are doing lectures in virtual worlds. In education and training, there are over 400 schools who have a presence in Second Life alone. As well, you can go visit NASA, the JPL Co-Laboratory, museums like the Exploratorium have spaces in the virtual world. This group is very recent, the Federal Consortium of Virtual World Users, so it's about a year and a half old, So this is an effort to bring everybody in the federal domain that's using virtual worlds for any purpose, whether it's training or meetings, anything that they're using it for, bringing them together so everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And what's great about this is they can have a lot of clout for the makers of virtual worlds to get functions that are necessary for more sophisticated uses, such as private servers behind firewalls. This group was directly responsible for Linden Lab behind Second Life to get private servers behind firewalls. There's a lot of communities and interest groups within the virtual worlds. These can be cultural, environmental, charities raise money in the virtual world. Content creators and artists have many groups, and there's a number of them for help and support that are up and coming. So, I think I went the wrong way. So our project, our Coming Home project, wanted to look at specific ways that virtual worlds could be applied to soldier reintegration issues. Now we know about the great work Skip and his team are doing in PTSD and TBI therapy with virtual environments, and we don't think virtual worlds are quite ready for total, this kind of traditional clinical therapy yet. But they are very good for the camaraderie and peer-to-peer support, and this is something that the military is really emphasizing now, this peer-to-peer support. So we think of virtual worlds as being like the VFW hall of the 21st century. We don't have those VFW halls so much. People are not co-located in the same neighborhoods anymore, but this can actually serve in that way. And also, we think they're very good for stress relief because they've got a way to bring people in and give them activities, and that's what we're focusing on, the camaraderie and the stress relief. Now, our target audience is the 300,000 plus veterans who need some kind of help when they come back from conflicts. Only 1 in 3 ever seeks mental health. And this is a very disturbing situation, but there are a lot of reasons. The biggest one that the military is dealing with is that there's a big stigma attached to getting help. It makes you feel weak, it makes you look weak. Some supervisors don't support it. It may hurt your job advancement opportunities, and then many of them do not even realize the extent to which they need help. As well, some of them live in rural areas or they're disabled, they can't get to where the therapies are given, so there's a location issue. And even for those that do get help, many of them who start treatment do not finish it. There's a huge, huge dropout rate. So our questions for the TOPSS project were these. Can a virtual world become a standard part of a veteran's reintegration process? And can we use it to provide social support, stress relief, and other kinds of therapies to veterans inside the virtual world? And then, of course, because we're ICT, we wanted to see if we could put intelligent virtual humans in the virtual world, because that had not really been done. Every avatar was controlled by a person, or sometimes they had them running as models in stores, but you couldn't talk to them. So we really wanted to get that functionality in the virtual world. We chose Second Life as the world that we've used for several reasons. One, it's free for the users to use. It has a lot of content creation tools, and it's actually encouraged that users build their own content and own their own content. The Linden Lab company behind Second Life is constantly improving and extending the functionality, and as well they've made available the Linden Lab scripting language so that we can extend the functionality the way we want. So here's our area in Second Life. We have 4 islands, or what they call SIMs. Each one is run by a processor. We call the whole area Chacoma Island, even though they have different names. And we have a number of areas and activities that are available on Chacoma Island for these various purposes. The therapeutic offerings that we're looking at are in the realm of complementary and alternative medicine. This is something that Eric is going to talk a little more deeply about, but basically they deal with 4 areas: mind-body medicine, like meditation; biological approaches, like herbal supplements or diet; body-based therapies, like massage; and energy methods that would be including biofeedback. So we have a number of places on the island. Whoops, going the wrong way. The lodge is the center of the social area for Chacoma Island. It has a gathering place in the center and two big wings that are full of games that are physics-based games. Second Life is built on the Havoc engine. So you can see some very interesting places to sit. We modeled it on a ski lodge, and it's very relaxing to sit there and listen to the fireplace or sit out back and listen to the waterfall. This is an example of one of the games in the game wings. So you put on a HUD or a heads-up display, and you have extreme control of the cue. You can angle it, you can decide how hard to hit, and you can actually play a pretty mean game of pool, and darts pretty much the same. We also have resource areas in the virtual world. This board here is a way for people to find out websites and other help that's being put out there by the military, such as the self-assessment screening to see if you do need help, Military One Source, suicide prevention hotline. So these, if you click on them, they will open a website right within Second Life. As well, we have calendars about activities that are coming up if we have a concert or some kind of party or a scavenger hunt, and the scheduled therapy sessions, which we are starting to schedule right now. So with that, I'm going to let Eric Chance come talk about some of the health activities and the data gathering that we're doing.
Part of the work of the TOPSS project is to explore the use of complementary and alternative medicine, or CAM therapies, in the virtual world. CAM therapies are non-traditional medical practices that fall outside of conventional treatments, and a special division of the NIH called the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, or NICM, is devoted to exploring their validity. Prominent Air Force surgeon Colonel Richard Nieptzow is on the board of advisors for NICM. Even though CAM therapies are non-traditional, they're not exactly on the fringes of Western society. The CDC National Health Statistics report here shows that 38.3% of adults in the U.S. use some form of CAM, and the Walter Reed Army Medical Center also uses several types of CAM, including yoga nidra and meditation. Now, you may ask yourself, what does the virtual world have to do with health? Well, we already know from the work of Skip Rizzo that a virtual environment itself can have a profound psychological effect on the viewer. But the work of Jeremy Bailenson Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford shows us that there is a potential for the act of observing your avatar itself to provide real psychological and behavioral effects through what they term the Proteus effect. The Proteus effect is when a person develops expectations for an avatar's behavior, and then they conform to those expectations with their real behavior. For example, in one study, subjects were given taller avatars and then negotiated more aggressively in both the virtual world and subsequent face-to-face negotiations. In another of the lab studies, users who observed a virtual representation of themselves exercising expressed significantly higher levels of exercise in the real world following their session than those who watched a representation of someone else or not watching them anything, not watching themselves exercise virtually. Research by Lim and Reeves at Stanford also showed that the simple act of allowing the user to choose their own avatar and viewing that avatar in a third-person perspective leads to greater physiological arousal and an increased sense of presence. To validate the effectiveness of a CAM therapy within a virtual world, we obviously had to explore CAM therapies that have been vetted through evidence-based studies. And the most promising CAM therapy we found was mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. And we're partnering with the psychologists Steve Hickman and Rochelle Vaught from the UCSD Center for Mindfulness to explore the uses of MBSR within the virtual world. MBSR, in a nutshell, is basically just secular meditation. It's just based on Buddhist meditation, but without the Buddhism. And it has over 2 decades of published research showing it to be an effective complementary treatment for psychological ailments such as anxiety and depression, but surprisingly, it also improves response to treatment for physical ailments such as chronic pain, immune response, fibromyalgia, and even psoriasis. And you can see a Google Tech Talk on it by John Kabat-Zinn, who is the founder of the Clinical Tech Technique, and he's Professor of Medicine Emeritus and founding director of the Stress Reduction Clinic in the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. And if you watch the Google Tech Talk, he'll actually go into some of the clinical studies at the 41-minute mark if you just want to go straight there. And he also led a session with the actual staff of Google of MBSR as well that you can find. And it's that tiny URL right there if you want to copy it down and watch it later. According to Dr. Jose Cole, clinical associate professor with the School of Military Social Work and Veterans Services at USC, returned veterans, especially those with disabilities, often expressed how much they miss jogging and other physical training activities that they're used to doing every day. Given recent research in the positive effects of virtual world activity on real life, like the Proteus effect that we talked about earlier, we believe that offering such an experience in a virtual world might also positively benefit a person's real-world physical and psychological well-being. However, we wanted to take a novel approach to designing the control system of the running activity. Normally in Second Life, you navigate your avatar around the world by using just a keyboard and mouse, but we didn't want to do that. Instead, we decided to set up a system by which you would just breathe slowly and regularly, and a microphone would pick up the sound of you breathing, and that would make your avatar propel forward. We have two goals in mind in using slow, regular breathing as a control mechanism for a virtual running activity. And the first is to provide a real physical benefit to the user. Research published in the Journal of Human Hypertension showed that slow, regular breathing, accompanied by biofeedback for as little as 10 minutes a day, can be effective in significantly lowering blood pressure. The secondary goal is to help overcome any potential bias toward complementary and alternative medicine therapies that utilize breathing as part of their practice, such as MBSR, which we talked about, or yoga. They both use breathing exercises, and maybe people would be apprehensive about using something that was a little strange. So putting it in the form of a game-like activity would help ease those inhibitions. We achieved this part of the project by making use of a seldom used and poorly documented feature of Second Life, in that you can detect volume levels of sound and then have that translated into a report of low, medium, or high volume that you pick up with the script. Using this capability of Second Life and scripting it within the virtual world means that users don't have to buy any expensive equipment to participate, but it does mean that we have to educate them on how to set up their microphones correctly, and it also makes the assumption that what they're doing is actually breathing and not making some other sound, but the cadence of speaking looks a lot different than breathing slowly and regularly, so that does help. Now this is basically just showing you a little bit about what I'm going to show you on the next slide, which is a video of how it works. Since the user is not using the keyboard for controls, we have to actually control the avatar and move it around, but there's no scripting support to actually control an avatar fully. You can't rotate an avatar, for example, with the Linden scripting language. So instead, I kind of made a hack where you put down a transparent box. He'll put it down and he'll sit on it, and then it will become transparent. And I'm going to enable transparency just so you can actually see it. So it's actually the box that is moving, and the avatar is connected to it, and it's overriding his animations. Now down here, the red bar is the bar that you're trying to match, and me actually breathing is moving this green bar up and down. That's basically modeling the breath, so you can see that you're matching it. Now you run along as you progress from standing to walking to running, and if I stop breathing, then eventually he'll slow down to a walk, and then eventually stop. And that goes all the way around all four sims of our environment. Now, in order to gather data on the users of our virtual space, Sean Bouchard and I devised a data collection and display system for Second Life that we dubbed the Collection and Annotation Research Tool Organizing Graphical Results with Associated Paths and Heat Maps, or Cartograph for short. We thought we were really clever when we made that up and didn't think about that we'd have to actually say it in front of people. I handled the data collection on the Second Life side, which is written in Linden scripting language, and Sean handled the database and display, which uses the Java-based processing language with some recent additions by Dinesh. There's two different methods of gathering data that we have, and both collect the same information, but at different rates necessarily. Basically, the first method is that you have an array of sensors, 5 sensors per sim, basically, because they're limited by the range at which they can sense. So imagine that these are 4 sims, and 20 arrays of sensors are across all 4 sims. This is an overhead view or a down view of our entire space. They collect the XYZ coordinates, the timestamp, and the name of the sim that the person is in, as well as the name of the person. And the data scripts can't hold a lot of data in Second Life, so after we've gathered 10 points of data, we transfer that through an HTTP request that contains the data in a single string that is parsed using PHP and then stored as an XML file. And the other method of collection is in that actual HUD that you saw earlier, that with the bars going up and down. There's an embedded sensor there that collects at a more rapid rate once a minute, so we can actually tell when the person's jogging, where they're starting and stopping, and how they're progressing throughout the entire thing. And the jogging path actually extends all the way along through the whole island, and it takes about 10 minutes to run the whole thing. The next slide is just showing you how this actually works, how you would interact with it on the web. You log in and you can filter it starting by date, your starting date or ending date, and you select the people, all the people that it has sensed will appear, and then you confirm it, and then you come up with this screen. These are all the data points. You can actually see the maps, and those were heat maps showing where the greatest concentrations of activity are located. And then you can actually watch the paths be drawn out by date. And then you can also, you can see it. You can actually hover the mouse over each data point and see what that represents. You can see that, oh, Kip was there at that time on that date. And then you can also deselect certain ones, so you can just isolate individual paths. And then all of that information is stored in a database, so we could display it in other ways as well. And next, Kip is going to talk about the virtual agents. Oh, sorry, Dinesh. Sorry.
So I'll be talking about virtual agents in Second Life. So our main question was why we require virtual agents in Second Life. So one of the main reason is Second Life is very huge, and it is lots of time it's very empty, it's very confusing. So if I enter into a Second Life, I would like to see around places. I would like to have a person who can guide me to see around places, especially a friend, but the friend is not always online. So we thought of creating virtual agents who can help them show around places, talk to them about the place, give them a tour of the island and everything. Because they can be available as 24/7, can serve many other purposes, and can even log the data, so we can modify our chat messages. We'll be talking about 3 virtual agents. First one is a virtual tour guide, which will be explained by me, and other 2 will be explained by Kip. So InfoClarity is our virtual tour guide. It's an embedded conversational and navigational agent in Second Life. The main purpose of this agent is to greet any avatar which comes into our island in Second Life, provides them with the information about our island, give them a tour of the island, or take them to places on the island. So the architecture of InfoClarity is it's a C# based implementation which uses Open Metaverse, which is a .NET library provided for accessing Second Life. This library implements client-server protocol and allows virtual agents to connect Second Life in the same way a person will connect to Second Life. The guide interacts with avatars using private conversation or public conversation, which is instant message or chat. We have used NPC editor to retrieve the best answers for the questions. We are using ActiveMQ as a message broker between them. Conversations, as I said before, we are using either public and private conversation, which is chat-based or instant message-based. Private conversation, in some cases, private conversation are totally different than the normal chat conversation. Basically, in navigational questions, because avatar has to be near the guide so that he can show him the places around the island. Even private conversation can be anywhere on the island or anywhere in the world, so he can answer the questions to the avatar. We implemented this by using 3 different classifiers in Empathy Editor. The general one, chat, and IM. General basically have questions related to both IM and as well as chat, while there are different questions in chat and IM also, which are separate. Info knows everything about the island. He can answer all the questions about the island. He can give a tour to the people around the island. He can teleport people around the island. If he doesn't have answer to any questions which is not in his domain, we are transferring these questions to an online bot, which is a Pandora bot, which is available online. And like any other type of question, like how many states are there in US, or what is the color of the sky, and something like that, can be easily answered by this bot. This is one of the example of the chat conversation. And after talking to the guide with info clarity about the island and giving them answers accordingly. Now I'll be talking about the navigation, like how Avatar walks around the places. So we have given predefined paths where the Avatar moves. These paths are basically represented by a graph with vertices and nodes. Info keeps track of the closest landmark where he's standing from, and if someone wants to go to some place, it uses an algorithm called A-star algorithm, which finds the lowest cost distance between the 2 points. When a visitor arrives at destination, he gives a brief description about the island and he moves on, about the place and he moves on. Here's a cartograph data of info, and where the circle determines the node, and the line determines the path of info around the island. Avatar management, so the guide needs to manage avatar as well. So any avatar who visits the island, the guide has to know that whether he visited for the first time or he's visiting again. In such case, we are tracking all the information of the avatar, like either the person who is controlling the avatar is away from keyboard, whether he's online, offline, whether he's what location he is present, standing on, and can decide how to address this avatar accordingly. Like if the avatar comes for the first time on our island, he will greet himself. He will greet them and give them a calling card so they can call him about any questions whenever they want on the island. If the avatar comes for another time, like not the first time, he basically greets them as by their name, like how you have been, like he have met them before. Besides that, he can teleport people to any place on the island wherever they want to go. Can give personal and group tours. In case of group tours, make sure that all the people in the group are always together while he is giving the tour. If someone is lost, he will wait for the person, or if the person doesn't come in a short while, send an instant message to ask them whether they want to teleport to that place. If no one, if there is no response, he'll continue the tour with other people in the group. He also, and now Kipins will talk about how to do that.
I'm just going to briefly talk about 2 more virtual agents and Second Life. And these agents are part of some of the enrichment activities that the group has put together. But first, I just wanted to mention the structure that was built early on. This is called the Story Tower, and it was basically you go in it and there's a spiral kind of path to the top, and it's designed to allow the user to, or allow anyone to put paintings along the path and other cues to kind of set up the story for the interaction with the virtual agent at the top. And I'm going to talk first about the dog warrior here, and this guy's known as a dog soldier, and he's historically, dog soldiers or dog men were one of 6 military societies in of the Cheyenne Indians. And beginning in the late 1830s, this society evolved into a separate kind of militaristic band, which played a dominant role in the Cheyenne resistance to American expansion. We kind of wanted to set up some stories and some narrative in the environment that perhaps a soldier or warfighter could relate to in some way, but that was removed enough that there wouldn't be any direct similarities. This is a very, very interesting character, and the kind of backstory on the dog soldier is that they would stake themselves to the ground during some kind of battle, and they wouldn't kind of leave their spot until the battle was over. So they're, in the folklore, they're known as very very bold and brave kind of warrior. But anyway, so the dog soldier is sort of like I mentioned, a metaphorical warrior based on the historical Cheyenne dog soldier. Narrative is designed to build some rapport. And so we kind of set up the story in this story tower where you go in and you see a bunch of paintings and you hear some audio narrative and some music and so forth and so on that kind of set up your interaction with the dog soldier. And I'll have Jackie play part of the clip here. There it is. You can guess who recorded it for us.
When the dog rope was passed down to me, it became a part of a great tradition. I was a dog soldier, a warrior among the Cheyenne. In times of peace, we stood beside our clansmen, but in times of war, they stood behind us.
Now, if you didn't know Skip, I mean, it's a pretty convincing story. But and there's some drums and other things that kind of increase as you go along. So once you kind of heard the backstory, you arrive at the top and you can interact directly with the dog soldier here. And it was this is interesting to work on because we put a lot of thought into the kind of responses that you'd want to have from him that would sort of stimulate a conversation or maybe a therapy session or something like that, where he kind of talks about why he had to defend his people, and did he kill people, did he have to handle weapons and so forth and so on, where are they now, and where does that leave him? So it's I think the narrative itself is pretty interesting. And then just from like a technical perspective, very similar to the other virtual human that Dinesh talked about. We've got Open Metaverse running a server here at ICT that acts as a login to Second Life, and then we integrate with NPC Editor to classify the questions. And on the SL side, I've got him doing some different animations with his arms and so forth as he's interacting. And right now we've got about 100 responses and maybe 150 paraphrased questions that help match up to the answers. And then I didn't even realize that Dinesh had kind of connected his virtual agent to the Pandora bot, but I think we're going to do that. That's pretty interesting. And so you can see kind of an example of some of the interaction here. And then just moving on, this is the Labyrinth guide, and this Labyrinth is kind of right next to the story tower. And I don't really know a lot about labyrinths, so I kind of did a little reading and just to give you some kind of back information. They date back to ancient Greek mythology, and originally they were kind of an elaborate structure designed to hold the Minotaur, which is the half man, half bull in Greek mythology. And today they're really used by a wide variety of peoples and cultures across the world, and even in video games for various purposes, often for private meditation or to gain some reward or learn some piece of information as part of some bigger story or competition. But I like the description from the Labyrinth Society that they wrote. When walking among the turnings, one loses track of direction of the outside world, and thus quiets the mind. It's kind of interesting because as you go through it, you do kind of wind up on the outside at different parts, and then on the inside in other parts, and then finally you wind up in the middle. And with this labyrinth, as you walk through it, if you follow it in order, there's kind of audio cues. There's like the tones of the major scale, and there's like a particle explosion that happens in the middle as sort of like a visual reward when you get through. And if you walk through it in a big display environment, you really do kind of get a sense of presence, and you sort of lose your sense of direction, as you're turning about. But this virtual agent is a very simple one. She's the labyrinth guide, and you can summon her when you first show up, and she'll explain how to walk through it and a few other interesting things about it. And just future work with the virtual humans in Second Life. So we're continually collecting the logs from all of the chats and interactions and trying to use them to enrich the dialogue and for other purposes. Also, we have another virtual agent in the works. This is a samurai warrior who was kind of wounded in some battle, and he does what's the calligraphy called? Kanji. Yes. So there's some. We're adding some of that artwork into the paintings, and we want to add voice recognition so that you can speak directly to them. And we're also working on creating a storytelling agent to assist veterans and other participants in actually mocking up their own story in the tower, and then kind of dialoguing or setting up some kind of narration so that they can express their own story, their own situation. And that's it for me.
That's it. Yeah. So we put up a transition slide here. This is actually the first frame from a video that you can find through the ICT websites and the project website that we put up. But now I'm going to talk about community. One of the important things to do with a group like this is to really form a tight community. And it's not easy to do this in the virtual world. We definitely wanted to connect with the veterans group that was already existing in the virtual world of Second Life. They started with about 300 members when we proposed this project, and now they're over 1,000 strong. But they were a little wary of us. They didn't know what we wanted. They have their own island, and their island is for all the services and all the conflicts. They have an information center. They have a building for each of the services with pictures and history in them. They have a nightclub. They have a chapel. So they have a number of vehicles out there that you can fly or drive. As well, they have the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Now, we were trying to figure out a way to build trust, and I was going to a lot of parties at the nightclubs and just hanging out with people and talking to them and getting involved in their group conversations. It's a really interesting group. When they do their group conversations, somebody will come on and say, hey, anybody there? Or somebody might come on and say, I'm having a really rough day and I'm thinking this is the end. And everybody comes to support them. So it's an interesting group in and of itself, just being peer-to-peer support. But to build trust, you know, I'm not one of them. I'm not a veteran. None of us are veterans. You know, we only have a couple here at ICT. So we looked at their space, and we asked them what they needed in their space. And one of the things that they really felt strongly about was having the honor guard for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. This is an incredibly important thing for them. So Dinesh went ahead and created one for them.
So as you can see, this is the honor guard for Tomb of the Soldier. The main problem of creating honor guard was the walking animation provided by Second Life. The default walking animation are very fast, and honor guard has to walk slowly on the left stride. So as Eric said before, we created an object which overrides the walking animation provided by Second Life. We created our own walking animation. Honor guard walks exact 21 steps on each side, turn over and walk back. Exact. It looks as the same as the honor guard which walks on the soldier. Jackie.
They love that honor guard. And in fact, if the sim goes down and the honor guard's not running, they let us know immediately. But Dinesh has, as with most of our agents, they automatically log themselves back on. So usually they're pretty stable, but if he's not there for 5 minutes, they're on the instant message with me. Now we have a number of collaborations, and this is actually many of the veterans here hanging out at the Welcome Center. Linden Lab is helping us with any technical support. We haven't had to have much yet, but they have fixed a few problems for us, and also third-party providers for Second Life. The veterans group, as I said, they've been helping us test things. They're really great. If we say, come test the running path, they're there. And a number of other things. We've used them for the video that we shot. We have medical, CAM, and military health experts as advisors on this project, and they have been amazing and wonderful. Now, future plans, we would like to have more CAM therapies, things like Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous in world groups, art and music therapies perhaps. We have a number of therapists talking to us about things like Santre therapy or different kinds of activities that are used in therapeutic modes. Anyway, one of the things we'd like to do in the future is have a separate island where families can visit, so deployed soldiers can come visit with their families who would be taking on the form of avatars. But most importantly, we've got to do long-term and short-term studies on the effectiveness of CAM within the virtual world. We know mindfulness-based stress reduction is effective in the real world. We don't know if it'll work here because, of course, it has to be modified in order to do it. It's 8 weeks. They go once a week, and they have homework in between times, and we'll be starting that in April. We're also working with Dr. Valerie Rice at Fort Sam Houston, and this summer she will take some recently returned veterans through the mindfulness-based stress reduction in Second Life and have a control group that doesn't get that. We would like to see if that mitigates the decline in health scores that is standard for people who return. They're pretty okay when they first get here, and then 6 months later, reality is set in and they're not so okay. So we're going to see if this can help mitigate that. So that is pretty much our talk. You're going to get to see Second Life in the VR Theater if you want to. We've saved 15 minutes or so for that. It's a synchronized 3-screen Second Life viewer that Kip Haynes has made, and it actually logs in 3 clients and gets the cameras all synced and deals with really interesting problems that we're still working on. Some of them, like when you cross a sim, it's hard for all 3 clients to keep up. But if you are interested, that's going to be running. And now we'll take some questions if you have any questions. Cheryl.
How long has this been up and running, and how many visitors have you had, or is it?
We started it about a year and a half ago, and so I'd say it's been up and running for about a year, but we haven't opened it to anybody in any big way, except the veterans have access to come anytime they want. The first big push will be the mindfulness-based stress reduction course that we're going to take about 16 participants for. Kevin?
How do you track or monitor the users that have come already to verify that they are actually veterans or that they're not grievers?
That's a really excellent question. We have the island closed off to all but a couple groups. One group is the U.S. Military Veterans Group, and the other one is a group that we're calling Center Visitors. So many of our advisors have come in that way.
For virtual guide for that, how much of this you provide for answer? I'm wondering if when you apply that the virtual agent for the therapy later, so it'll be okay.
Well, we're not going to actually have a virtual agent do therapy. The agent that we're going to implement an agent that is a helper for the mindfulness-based stress reduction, and that agent will basically serve the purpose that a CD that they give you to do your homework will. But we're not trying to make the agents take the place of a therapist. So we think that it's not quite there yet.
But virtual guide is pretty high.
The virtual guide is pretty smart. Yeah, I'd say he's our smartest guide right now. The storyteller guide, I think, is going to get some interesting functionality too, because that's a really interesting area to have a narrative agent. Yeah, anything that's life or death, I don't know that we'd want to mess with people that much. I'll take Josh first.
What's the expandability of the island? Like, for instance, how much of the island are you currently using for the features that you have there, and is it like, is it suitable for a certain number of veterans? Is there a point at which you're going to need to expand?
The answer to that is, in terms of building, there's a limit on number of sort of modeling objects you can have. It's pretty high. We're not nearly there yet, but we've made the space so that it has a lot of green space, the running path. Eric's been working on a climbing wall for competitions, a rock climbing wall. In terms of number of avatars, that's a Second Life limitation. And it is about 40 avatars per sim. before it gets really laggy. And that's more or less depending on how much geometry you have on that sim. We have in the center of the space a stage that will be used for different things, and that covers 4 sims, so you can get 40 avatars on each sim and looking into the center, so that's pretty cool. We're going to hold a health conference there next month, so that's going to be very interesting. Yes.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the who the veterans are who are in the group. Are they folks who joined Second Life and discovered the Army group, or for the most part are they folks who were brought to it through some institutional involvement?
Nothing's been institutionally mandated or suggested yet. So these are people that got into Second Life and then found each other. 3 of them decided to form this group about 2 years ago, and it just, they got their friends in that they knew. They actually have a process of vetting each person that tries to join the group. So you'll see a message go by. It says, I have somebody at the Welcome Center who says he was in Vietnam in 1970 in the Air Force. Can somebody come and check them out? So they interview each other to see if they're the real deal.
But they've somehow been vetted as an organization that the military folks are interested in.
Nope. They actually formed their own not-for-profit company, but they're not part of the military at all. We haven't gotten any buy-in from any military or veterans organization at this point. No, nobody has.
I see. Okay.
I have kind of a follow-on question to that. What degree of anonymity do the users of this world
I forgot to mention
enjoy?
that. Thank you for bringing that up. So what's also intriguing about Second Life is that nobody has to know your name unless you tell them. So you pick a fictitious name when you go in. Usually you can pick your first name, and then you have to select the last name from a set of names that they change all the time. For a while they had Debevic. I thought it would be very funny if somebody was Paul Debevic in there. Sometimes they have things like Cupcake and Kolache and, very strange things. So you are anonymous. Now, there is a way now to have your real name, but for people who may be worried about the stigma, that's a big deal. Now, that also raises ethical issues, because if you start having a therapist in the virtual world and there is a problem and they don't really know how to get hold of the real person, that whole area is really open for a lot of discussion and decisions about how to best implement it so that everybody's protected to the extent we can do that. Another reason we're not doing full medical stuff.
When you go to evaluate this, what are some of the variables that you're going to track to see if they improve and readjust into the post-war world?
There are 2 instruments. One is the post-deployment health assessment test, and then there's the post-deployment reassessment. So those are the standard ones that are used when they come back, and then it's 6 months. So those will be part of it. We'll probably add some of our own questions and maybe have a couple of other instruments that Dr. Rice will suggest. But the PH, whatever it is, post-deployment health assessment and reassessment are the primary ones that have been used. Last question, and then maybe 2 last questions. Galen, and then
Are there any similar NAAA type of sites already existing in Second Life?
There are support groups. I do not know of any. There may be a few AAs. I don't think there's any NAs. But one of the people we were working with on our TRADOC project is an AA member who suggested that we should have that in there because it really lends itself to that, and he's about to retire, and I'm hoping to bring him in to lead those sessions, hopefully. So last question up here. Diane?
First, it's terrific to learn about this work. Thanks, Jackie, to you and your group. And second, what is your plan for rolling in speech recognition?
We're going to be doing testing on that before the end of this year. We have a little bit of Shree's group's time to do that. So we'll see how it goes. There is only one voice provider for Second Life right now, and it's going to be a challenge.